Investigations. Middle Georgia Paranormal Investigations, or MGPI as you'll hear me refer to it as, is a small group based in and established and created in the Macon, Georgia area. And we are back with Judika. And from what I understand, everybody can now hear me. If you cannot, and you're only seeing my lips move, please let me know so that way I can fix it, because I don't even know how long it was like that until people started saying they were seeing me and not hearing me, and I had somebody check, and then sure enough, something was wrong. So, Judika, thank you so much for your patience and hanging in there with me.
Okay.
I honestly, all I did was I restarted the program. You heard me. I checked the settings. Everything was fine. I restarted the program, and now we're working. Don't really know. Just happens how it is sometimes. Okay, so we were already talking about the mystic saints and sages, and I don't know how far we got into that with everybody not being able to hear us.
I don't know.
I don't know either. So can we kind of just take it back from the beginning of how you determine your own personal saintly benefactors?
The most straightforward way is to ask for help and see if you get a reaction. There is an experimentation quality to it, and there are instructions in Mystic Saints and Sages. There are instructions of how to ask and how to try, but you are looking either for a saint who resonates with you for some reason,
mm-hmm.
and I always say it's a saint whose story makes you cry. But if you have always loved Joan of Arc, and you don't even know why, then that's a good place to start. Alternatively, saints have patronages and matronages. They have things and people that they essentially have almost like a professional association with, if that makes sense. There are certain saints who are associated with very specific dangers or illnesses. Saint Anthony, who is very, very beloved, is associated with finding things. If something or someone is lost, Saint Anthony is a good place to start. And if you don't get a response, I always say it's like medication. If you have a headache and aspirin doesn't work for you, you can either lie there and suffer until it goes away by itself, if it goes away by itself, or you can work your way through the remedies until you find the right one that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing that will happen is you will be left in the same situation that you started in. The Archangel Raphael, who is considered a saint in some traditions, is a great healer. And so if you have, an illness, Pope John Paul II is they are planning a very, very big canonization party for him in the very near future. He, as many of you know, suffers from Parkinson's in life, and the miracles that are associated with him are the healing of Parkinson's disease. And so having that connection, if you or a loved one suffers from that ailment, he understands. It's a good place to start. There are saints who are associated with specific professions, from the respectable professions to the less respectable professions. You should never think there is not a saint for you. Regardless of what you do, or if you perceive yourself as somehow not worthy, there are saints who specialize in people who feel unworthy. There are saints who specialize in certain illnesses and certain animals. If you love cats, for example, so does Saint Gertrude of Nivelles. You should never feel that because of who you are, or what you do, or your past, or your aspirations for the future, that there isn't a saint for you, because there is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very... I think that if a lot of people, and I know a lot of people get their back up when I tell people, I wrote a book about saints, and I watch them get their back up, and they kind of lecture me on why they don't appreciate saints, but they could be given a bad rap. Mm-hmm. The saints themselves, if you sort of remove propaganda, for lack of a better word, they're very loving. They're loving and they're generous. It is the benevolent dead who still care about the living. And it's a lovely thing. And because they were people, they're often more sympathetic than other spiritual entities who may not have had human experiences. People who are saints know what it's like to be heartbroken, know what it's like to not feel well, know what it's like to not want to get up in the morning. It's that commonality of being a human being is shared.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with that 110%. So what is the variety of different saints from different spiritual traditions? Can you just kind of dab on that? Just dab. I know it's really a long list, but...
So the Roman Catholic Church, the canonized saints don't go away. So that's the thing. Canonized saints, what does the word canonization mean? It means they're literally written down on a canon roll, on a calendar. So even the saints who stopped performing miracles, they're still recorded. They're still documented. There are over 10,000 Roman Catholic saints.
Oh my goodness.
With more still coming. There are saints and there are numerous saints of other traditions with more still coming. The difference with other traditions is that when saints stop performing miracles in other traditions, eventually they tend to be forgotten. Because, saints, there's a word of mouth aspect to it. I have a problem, I request assistance, I receive a miracle, what do? I tell everybody. And other people start to ask, and they receive, and they tell more people. And so one of the ways to know, if you see people talking about a saint a lot of people talking about a specific saint, that probably means that saint is an active saint. That saint is right now. That saint is performing a lot of miracles for many people. Saint Anthony, Saint Expedite. Saints, have periods of activity. It's almost like in periods of hibernation. Mm-hmm. Saints they sort of disappear for a while. But in other traditions, when saints disappear, people move on to other ones. You keep looking for someone who will help provide you with that miracle. But there are tons.
Now, is there a difference between folk saints and religious saints?
Yeah. I would also bring up official and unofficial saints. Folk saints are saints who may not be tied to any spirit. The act of requesting assistance from a saint or venerating a saint, and venerate doesn't mean worship. Venerate means love. Venerate derives from the same source as Venus, the word Venus, venereal. Saints are to be loved. You want to have a loving relationship. They're not gods to be worshipped. The entire process is a spiritual process, but there are saints that have nothing to do with any religion. Argentina and Vietnam, for instance, have saints who are almost culture heroes. The Trung sisters who liberated Vietnam from rule by the Chinese centuries and centuries ago, after they died, emerged as saints. And because they were military heroes, even under an atheist communist government, their veneration wasn't discouraged, because you could look at them in many ways, not purely as a religious figure, although for many people they are religious figures. Joan of Arc is very unusual for a saint in that she has both a feast, an official Roman Catholic feast, But she also has a public national feast. There are a lot of people who don't perceive her as a saint, who just perceive her as a military hero. Joan of Arc was not canonized until 1920. She was an unofficial saint for that long. And what does that mean?
Wow.
The canonization process is a very detailed, bureaucratic, slow process. The Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, has a similar process. They are the only branches of a religion that have such a process. And originally, Christian saints were also, they emerged through public veneration. The saints have a tendency to appear to people in dreams, in visions, sometimes as apparitions. The most famous apparitions in the world are the Marian apparitions, where Mary, the mother of Christ, has appeared to people with blessings or warnings or all sorts of things. But when we say an apparition, it's tangible. It's as if you're really seeing a person at that moment. Guadalupe, in Mexico, the apparition, the person who saw her, thought he was speaking to a woman. At some point he realized there was a supernatural component to it. And he had been a shaman before conversion to Christianity. But it's very real. Mm-hmm. It's very much like, people are comfortable with the word paranormal around saints because of the religious component. But in the same way that people have an apparition of the ghost, it's an apparition. There's a reality to it. It's when it's happening, you may not be thinking, oh, this is a ghost. It's not a real person at that moment. It's as real as any other contact with anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And, in a lot of religions, they mention spiritual warfare and, things from the other side. And, to get offended by that connection sometimes just appalls me, because it's even there within the, religious text of many of these religions.
An unofficial saint is, the thing is that it's a long process to become canonized. It can take years, and it's expensive. It can take a lot of money. Every recent saint who's been canonized had people who really, really were devoted to their cause and put a lot of time and effort and money often into it. But what if you have a saint? What if it's a Christian community who venerates saints the same way? They know how you venerate a saint, and it's the way they've been taught. But there is a miracle worker who, for one reason or another, is not canonized or not canonized yet. People who need a miracle need help now. Mm-hmm. And so the active unofficial saints will often become venerated just as if they were a canonized saint. And it's a controversial topic, depending on who the saint is. Joan of Arc, for example, it took her about almost 500 years to become canonized. Mm. And there's a political component.
And would that be because she's a woman? Would that have anything?
No, there are plenty of female saints. It's because of her associations with esotericism. She was not obedient. She may not be a good role model. I mean, if you hear her story, she was convinced that she had a direct connection to the angels, to various female saints, as a matter of fact, St. Catherine, St. Margaret, to God. She was on a mission from God, and even if churchmen told her to go home or told her to, recant what she had done or what she had said or what she believed, she refused. Mm-hmm. She was a very, very independent young lady. She died when she was approximately 19 years old, so she was really young. Mm-hmm. She came from the country. She probably didn't have a lot of education. But she was very, very confident in herself. She represented herself legally against professional attorneys and held her own. And she did have those accusations of sorcery. she was accused of all sorts of things that typically canonized saints are not accused of.
Mm-hmm.
But she was canonized right after World War I, when the government of France was not on the best terms with the Vatican, and that was what brought her. But for those almost 500 years, people loved her, and she was performing miracles, and people venerated her. They didn't forget her.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Now, can you take a moment to explain children's saints, and how does a child become classified as a saint?
It is hard. It is harder now. Although there is a little girl called, what is her name? Saint Antonetta Mio. And I always remember her because she died on my birthday. And so, hypothetically, she would be one of my saints. And she died in the 20th century. Was a very, very brave little girl. The bottom line with saints is they perform miracles. Most of the child saints were martyrs, and it can be a very sad life for children and for adults.
Mm-hmm.
Saint Cyrs and Saint Vitus. And Saint Vitus is a very, very, very powerful saint who has fallen somewhat out of fashion, at least in North America and Western Europe. I think he's still more popular in Central Europe. He was martyred as a child and emerged as a miracle worker. Little Antonetta Mio, there have been theological arguments about whether she could be considered a saint or not. And because she gave up, she dedicated herself to God. She was a very, very devout child. There is another little girl who is an American saint, a folk saint, Charlene, who is in Louisiana. And Charlene had a very severe but brief illness, and she dedicated her pain to helping others. And that is perceived as saintly. A lot of people who are, especially recent saints, people, while they were alive, they exhibited behavior that people associate with saints, and so they sort of as soon as they died, people expected them to become saints. Rose of Lima is an example. More recently, Michael Judge, who died 9/11, he is officially victim number 1 of the World Trade Center. He was the pastor to the fire department and was voluntarily inside the building. He didn't have to be inside the building, but he went to be with the firefighters. And because he was a public figure and he was recognized, he is, even though he was not the first person to die, he's officially victim number 1. And Michael Judge, during his lifetime, a lot of people depended on him, and they asked for his blessings. And there are people who believe that he intervened with them, children with birth defects. He intervened, and things worked out well for the child, and the disastrous situations did not occur. Instead, you had a happy mother and happy children, happy father. And Michael Judge, who will probably never be canonized, he was also a controversial person, an openly gay man who was a priest, who administered to people with AIDS when people were trying to avoid the situation, trying not to get involved. Michael Judge came out and was helping people and marched for people. And having passed away, if you look him up online, you'll see they are asking people to testify to miracles, so that perhaps he will be canonized. I think there's some free holy cards that you can print out for yourself online, or very recently. And so people anticipated, I don't want to say expected, but they anticipated that he would become a saint. A lot of saints are controversial. There are people who insist that Michael Jackson is performing miracles on behalf of children having passed away. Yeah, Sandy, you're laughing. I know. And every time I say that, somebody writes me a hateful email. But I have no, I can't say anything because I have no experience with this. I'm not speaking to you from my personal experience, but I do know that there are people who very sincerely believe that they requested his prayers and their children were healed. So, who's to say?
Now, with all this, I have to kind of ask, because different states fall under different religions and different,
Sure.
Then you have your unofficial saints and things of that nature. I mean, I have to ask, who, and this is, the agnostic part of me, I guess, that has to ask this question. Who's to say, which one you pray to which one and which one's right and which one of these saints are going to perform these tasks and, if it falls under a different religion,
You're going to say.
So is it more willpower and more, mental?
No, it is the individual. It is the individual. Maybe it's not the path for everybody. Maybe there are people who will have to find different paths for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people all over the world who swear very sincerely that they have been helped by specific saints or more than one saint. It's a very direct connection to the sacred.
Mm-hmm.
I always give the example of there is a kind of a votive painting called a retablo, that especially in Mexico, where there's a quid pro quo aspect to miracles. It's a reciprocal relationship. Having received something, you offer something. And often, and some people will offer very, very lavish offerings. St. Jude's Hospital was an offering from Danny Thomas, an offering of thanks to St. Jude. But, these offerings can also be very, very small. A candle, for example, as simple as a candle, one candle doesn't cost very much. A public testimonial, which, on a social media can be free.
Mm-hmm.
And in Mexico, one of the traditional ways was to create a little painting. They're inexpensive paintings that actually depicts a miracle. And so if you had this healing miracle, you would show the person recuperating or now healthy or in the midst of their surgery. And floating in the picture, it's sort of a standardized type of image. Floating, you would see the saint responsible. So, there's St. Barbara in the hospital room. And what the interesting thing with this type of painting is what's not in the picture. No church, no religious leaders. It's the person and the saint. It's a direct connection. You bypass all the middle people. And so, who's to say? You are, as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't work for you, then you can say it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's not about belief. It's really about knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find yourself in an emergency, especially an emergency where the more mundane solutions aren't working for you,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe there is no mundane solution. What the hell?
Yeah.
Ask for help from the saint. What's the worst thing that can happen? It's a miracle, not a science project. Everybody doesn't get their miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Life is hard. Anybody who tells you that 100% of their spells work may not be telling you everything. There are no guarantees.
Mm-hmm.
But I can testify on behalf of my saints. I'm telling you from my personal experience, it does work quite a lot of the time. And the ideal situation is to develop a personal relationship with a saint that is mutually beneficial. Mm-hmm. There's a friendship to it. So that is the ideal, where you look forward to the saint's feast day in the same way you look forward to a loved one's birthday. When a loved one has a birthday, you want to get them a cake.
Yeah.
You want to get them a gift. You don't even necessarily want anything back. It's just like you do. You want to share in that happy occasion. And so that's, in an ideal situation, that's the type of relationship that evolves.
Now, can you, and I do want to go ahead and just mention one more time, the image has been on your screen throughout the night as well as Judika's website, but the book we are referring to, because she has quite a many, is Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Judika, but the book itself basically is like a guidebook to help you figure out kind of what saint is correct for you.
It'll teach you how to do it. I write very practical books on mystical topics. It'll teach you how to do it. I could write another one, because there's so many saints that I could fill another 800-page book with even more saints.
Yeah.
But what I tried to do was write descriptions of the individual saints, so that when you read the description, they're real. They're real. They may resonate in your heart if they've had similar experiences. I do that with my spirits, and even I have a little book on the paranormal that is written under a pseudonym called The Wiser Field Guide to the Paranormal. And
I saw that, and I couldn't. I was pretty sure that was your book, but I didn't want to make the link. I didn't want to make the link.
It's written under the name Judith Joyce. Well, because I wrote two field guides very close together, and it's not publishing, conventional publishing wisdom. It's not good to have two books by an author be published very close together. But there are 6 books in that Wiser Field Guide series, and I wrote book 5 and book 6. There's so many books on the paranormal. Why do you need another one? And I would say what makes my book different is that when I write about people like the Fox sisters, the Eddy brothers, I try to make them real. I try to make them very human. It's because the bottom line is, we're all people. And after someone is, especially if they've passed away and they've gotten into the media, it's very easy to lose the humanity, to lose them. They become, it's like if you watch American Horror, I watch people talk about Marie Laveau and Madame LaLaurie, and it's as if they're characters. But these are people who lived and breathed not that long ago in terms of human history. And it's good to keep that in your mind. And I think especially if you're trying to do any sort of spiritual work, you are more likely to have a connection the more real the spiritual being is to you, the more likely you are to make that connection.
And I agree with that. Now, I kind of want to have some fun before we get off air. Because, a lot of people who watch this show are all interested in the paranormal, and we're looking at people that are either paranormal investigators, paranormal enthusiasts, cryptozoologists, or UFOologists, and things of that nature. So I kind of wanted to have some fun while we still had some time. I would like if you could, to go and say, what these people could do for protection within the field, especially since, you focused in a lot of the encyclopedias about protection and certain saints and stuff of that nature. So,
I think it's one of the primary goals of any kind of spiritual magical work. Is life is hard and people want to be protected.
Yeah, so we'll start with a paranormal investigator. What would you recommend that a paranormal investigator does for protection?
First of all, don't antagonize whatever you're investigating.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond anything else, be smart and don't antagonize. Beyond that, and to protect yourself, I'm an amulet lover. I love amulets. I collect amulets, even for traditions that aren't even my own tradition. I would load myself up with amulets. I would cleanse myself before going in, and by cleansing, spiritual cleansing, in my book 5,000 Spells, there's tons of cleansing recipes. The simplest is to make a salt scrub for your body. And remember, underneath your feet. That's the spot people tend to forget. Make sure that when you're cleaning all of yourself, under the feet, are just throwing a lot of salt water salt into a bath before. Anything that makes you uneasy, pay attention. Certain kinds of amulets will react. Evil eye beads crack, for example, although that may not necessarily apply to a paranormal investigator. Michael Archangel, I would have a Michael Archangel medal on. That's what I would do.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, for cryptozoologists, those who stomp out in the woods looking for monsters, what would you recommend for them?
Personally, I always go for the spiritual, and if I were potentially were potentially in danger, I would request spiritual protection. There are different beings, from animals specifically, maybe St. Francis. St. Francis protects the animals, but he also protects people from the animals. There are other beings like that, but that's at least a good start. You can't really separate the spiritual from the practical entirely. They go hand in hand. It's always crucial not to antagonize whatever it is that you're investigating, physically as well as spiritually. I think that whatever type of a creature it is, I would try to find the spiritual being that's connected with it. If I was in the woods, for example, I associate the woods with Artemis, the goddess. I would want to have her on my side. So whatever, I don't even want to say you should wear this or you should do that, because it's something that physical could possibly endanger your safety in terms of fragrances or making noise. Tread lightly and always approach with love and respect. Spiritually, that's what works in terms of safety. I think people who get in trouble with spiritual entities, clearly there are other situations and other reasons, but often it's people who are joking or who are nervous. And if you're afraid, you tend to attract the kind of beings that feed off fear.
That's true.
So you have to think about what you're radiating. What kind of an aura are you radiating? If you can be peaceful and serene, you are less likely to get into trouble.
That's true.
I suspect with cryptids also.
Yeah, and fear does, breed fear, and fear attracts fear. That's something that we talk about quite often. And last but not least, protection for UFOologists. Anything that you'd recommend?
It's really funny that you say that, because a lot of retablos, modern retablos, will show people rescued from aliens by assorted. They're great, by assorted sacred beings. The Holy Child of Etosha tends to come up very frequently as someone who saves from assorted extraterrestrial dangers. That's a good question, Shannon.
Maybe another book.
Yeah, that is actually a really. How is that different? I think it depends what the danger is and whether this is somebody who. I actually, my field guide to the paranormal does discuss UFOs and abductees and visitors. I try to take a neutral tone, so it's got some of both. But there are amulets. This is not what they were intended for. But there are amulets that are actually originally created for young children or frail children. They're East Asian amulets in the shape of padlocks that are intended to hold people to the ground, essentially to keep, to increase their gravity and keep them alive and keep them here. And maybe if that was me, I think I would be going in that sort of a direction. Iron. The iron amulets, iron beads, iron bracelets. Iron is supremely protective, and especially meteorite iron. because you have that celestial connection right there. I think Moldavite even, something that bridges Earth with the extraterrestrial. I think something in that direction is where I would go.
Cool beans. Well,
or that's where you got me going. Or some kind of like a charm bag with earth, like really strong dirt, literally. Some sort of protective dirt, and you'll find that in 5,000 spells too. Something to evoke the protection of the earth itself.
Now, before we have to go, because we only have a few more minutes left, I do want to ask, your website's been up all night, and so your different various covers for your books as well. But I do have to ask, kind of what's your plans for the future? Do you have any books you're currently working on or anything like that?
I'm working on a bunch of books, and we're going to see what shows up first. Too soon to name them yet, but I am working in a couple things, and
Are they going to continue to be encyclopedias, or are you kind of going in a different direction?
I am working on 2 encyclopedias. I am working on a book of fiction, and some things in the middle.
Cool.
And, we'll see what takes. What takes and what actually comes. Worked its way into the public eye. Yeah,
absolutely. And for everyone, once again, the website has been up on your screen all night. I'm spelling it out for you guys just in case you can't see, you don't have on your reading glasses or something. It's www.judikailles.com. And if memory serves me correct, there are links on your website to purchase the books, correct, Judika?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yes, there are links to different booksellers.
Yeah, that's what from my memory. I do this stuff right after, I booked you about a month and a half ago, and I check out people's websites right after I book them. So it's a tip of my memory, so I'm not 100% sure.
There are links to assorted booksellers, and even if your local bookshop doesn't have my book or another book on its shelves, it's hard for them to afford to keep well-stocked shelves. If you ask them to get it for you, most local bookstores will not charge you extra to order a book for you.
Yeah, and that's true. I know Barnes and Noble won't, and places like that, they'll just ship it right into their store, and you just go back and pick it up.
Because we need to support our little independent retailers too, and most of them won't either. But they'll be happy.
Yeah.
To get a book for you.
Well, sadly, we don't, in my area, we don't have any more like that. I mean, even Books A Million, which was smaller than Barnes & Noble, went out of business.
Yeah.
So all we really kind of have in our area now is Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, I know. Even Borders is gone.
Yeah, so absolutely. Well, Judika, I want to thank you so much for being on tonight. And when one of those books do stick, you just let me know, and I'll have you back on with
Thank you, Shannon.
Technical problems. I have never gone for so long in a show and not realized that, hey, we were having some audio issues, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, that was just one of those things tonight, I guess.
Thank you, Sharon.
So thank you so much, Judika, and I do want to mention that next week on Paranormal Minds, I will have on Chuck Bergman. He was a cop and a psychic medium also, and I will have him on, and he will talk about all his work within the field. Once again, Judika's website is up on your screen. Be sure to check out her website. It's absolutely awesome with tons of links to all of her books, any kind of protection, any kind of field guides to the paranormal, whether you're into witchcraft or anything of that, are all on Judika's page. Be sure to check that out. Once again, Judika, thank you so much. I truly do appreciate it. And
thank you, Shannon.
You guys have a wonderful night. I'll see you right back here next week. Same time, same place. Don't miss out. Have a good one.